Every night at 3:11 a.m., Clara hears it. 4 soft notes, a pause, then 5 more, humming through the floorboards of her grandmother's decaying house. It's subtle, rhythmic, almost human. And it's getting louder. But what begins as a haunting tune soon reveals a buried secret, a long-forgotten name, and a confession the house has been trying to whisper for decades. The village of Dunstow was the kind of place that disappeared behind mist and memory. Rows of weathered stone cottages stood hunched like old men against the wind, and the locals spoke in hushed tones even on bright afternoons. It was here, nestled on the edge of a forgotten forest, that Clara inherited her grandmother's house, a lopsided mossy structure whose windows had not seen sunlight in years. She arrived just before dusk, her suitcase thumping along the gravel path. The house greeted her with silence. Not the peaceful, domestic sort, but something heavier, as if the air itself was waiting. The key twisted reluctantly in the lock. Inside, the house was suspended in time. Lace curtains hung stiff with age, and the air carried the brittle scent of dried herbs and old secrets. Clara had only visited once as a child, but the layout was tattooed into her memory. The creaking staircase, the uneven floorboards in the parlor, the tiny reading room where her grandmother used to sit and stare at the floor for hours. It was the humming that woke her the first night. Not loud, barely above a whisper. A steady, breathy hum that seemed to rise from the floorboards beneath her bed. The kind of sound that might come from a throat not quite ready to form words. She sat up, heart quickening, and pressed her ear to the old wooden floor. It was still there. Rhythmic. Subtle. Almost human. Clara dismissed it at first. An old house settling, pipes groaning. But each night it returned, slightly louder, a fraction more distinct. It always began at 3:11 a.m. sharp. A low melodic humming, 4 notes, a pause, then 5 more. The same tune. Always the same. She recorded it on her phone, but the playback captured nothing. Not even the faintest whisper. It was only on the 5th night, when she followed the sound downstairs and into the parlor, that she felt it through her bare feet. A vibration, low and deliberate, coming from beneath the floorboards. And then she remembered something her grandmother once said long ago. Don't go pulling up what time has nailed down. Let sleeping would sleep. The next morning, Clara began digging through old journals and letters tucked away in the attic. Pages yellowed with time, most of them written in a sharp, looping hand. Her grandmother's hand. There were hints, odd entries that mentioned the hum and the thing beneath. One passage stood out. It sings when it's lonely. When the truth aches to be told, it hums. While exploring the attic, Clara discovered a photograph she had never seen before. Her grandmother stood beside a dark-haired woman with hollow eyes. On the back, in faded ink, Evelyn, 1946. Before it happened, Clara found no other mention of Evelyn. Not in the journals, not in the village records. A visit to the local historical society led her to the oldest man in Dunstow, Arthur Fenwick. You're living in that house again, he said, eyes narrowing. Did she not warn you? Clara asked about Evelyn. Arthur's face paled. There was a fire. Not in the house. In the mind, I think. Evelyn vanished. Some say your grandmother locked her in the cellar during one of her spells. Clara returned home shaken. She didn't believe in ghosts, but something was undeniably alive beneath her floor. And now Evelyn had a name, a time, a place, and perhaps a reason. That night the humming was louder, stronger, and for the first time she heard something layered beneath it. By the 10th night, Clara had ripped up 3 floorboards. Beneath them was only darkness and old dust. But she was certain something lived in the space between. The silence had shape, density. When she touched the joists, she could feel the hum through her fingertips. Like a heartbeat. She took to humming the tune during the day, testing it aloud. It made her lips numb, her throat dry. On the 12th night the tune changed. It responded. Harmony. Something was singing back. Then came the dreams. Locked room. A girl scratching at walls. A lullaby twisted with grief. Clara would wake up crying, the same phrase echoing in her head. I didn't mean to leave her down there. It happened without planning. Clara was pacing in the parlor when the floorboard beneath her heel gave way. She fell into blackness, dust, and air that hadn't moved in decades. When her eyes adjusted, she found herself in a crawlspace, no wider than a coffin. At the far end was a bundle wrapped in cloth, fragile, skeletal. Beside it a broken music box. Its winding key rusted, but the mechanism intact. She turned it. A slow, tinny version of the humming tune played. But this time it wasn't just music, it was memory. The room around her filled with emotion, love, guilt, terror. A voice whispered from nowhere, "Clara, thank you." And then silence. Clara sat in the cold darkness of the crawlspace for what felt like hours, her hand still resting on the rusted music box. The final notes of the tune had long faded, yet a strange warmth lingered in the air, like breath on glass. She reached toward the bundle of cloth, hesitant. The edges of the fabric crumbled at her touch, revealing beneath it an aged dress, child-sized bones, and a locket clasped between tiny fingers. Clara's breath caught. Her mind reeled, trying to piece it together. Evelyn. She hadn't just vanished. She had been buried. Hidden, silenced beneath the house all along. Not by accident. Her grandmother had put her there. Clara crawled backward, heart hammering, her palms raw from the stone floor. Back in the parlor, the house was deathly quiet. Even the humming had stopped. Clara didn't sleep that night. She sat by the fire, Evelyn's locket in her hand, slowly prying it open. Inside was a picture of two girls, her grandmother as a teenager, and Evelyn beside her, smiling softly. On the opposite half, etched into the silver lining, were words nearly worn away. "Forgive me when you hear it." The next day, Clara returned to the attic and opened the old cedar chest where her grandmother's Bible and letters were kept. Tucked between brittle pages was an envelope sealed with red wax. It was addressed to "the next daughter who listens." Hands trembling, she opened it. She wouldn't stop. Not after the séance. Not after what we saw. I begged her to forget. But Evelyn kept humming that tune over and over, as if it summoned something. I thought if I could quiet her, the song would die with her. But it didn't. It found new ears. If you've heard it, it means the secret isn't done. That thing under the floor, it's not just Evelyn. It's what she brought with her. Do not dig. Do not answer. Do not hum. But Clara already had. Word of Clara's return spread quickly through Dunstow. Most kept their distance, offering only sidelong glances and tight-lipped nods. But one woman approached her at the grocer, a gray-haired stranger with tired eyes. "You hear it, don't you?" she said. Clara didn't answer. The woman nodded. "You're not the first." The humming began in 1946. Before that, the house was quiet. They sat at the village cafe, steam curling above their tea. Your grandmother and Evelyn played with things they shouldn't have. They were curious, spirited. Girls like that sometimes open doors without meaning to. What kind of doors? The woman's hand shook as she sipped her tea. "There's an old tale around here. About a song that doesn't belong to this world. Said it was taught to humans by something else. Something that feeds not on flesh but guilt. It's a tune of invitation. And Evelyn. She sang it too many times. And then it sang back." That night, Clara returned to the crawlspace. Evelyn's remains had not moved, but something else had. The floor was pulsing. Gently, rhythmically, like the breath of something immense and sleeping. Clara placed her hand on the beams, expecting the old familiar hum. But what she heard now was different. There were two voices. One soft and sorrowful, Evelyn's, and another deeper, inhuman. As if the wood itself was groaning through its grain, echoing a hunger older than the house. Clara backed away and sealed the boards, hammering them shut. But the humming didn't stop. Spread. She heard it in the walls, in the pipes, behind mirrors and through vents. Always that pattern, 4 notes, pause, 5 more. Sometimes it shifted keys. Sometimes it sounded like her own voice. Clara stood at the threshold of the parlor with a hammer in one hand and the music box in the other. She had spent the last 2 days researching old rights, forgotten verses. Nothing offered a solution. Everything warned her to never complete the melody. But she had to know. On the floor, she drew a circle of salt, placed the music box at the center, and sat cross-legged beside it. With trembling breath, she began to hum. For notes. 5 more. She waited. Silence. Then, from below, a soft knock. Once. Then a voice. Not Evelyn's. Not her own. A voice that sounded like everyone she'd ever known, layered over itself, speaking as one. Confess. What? Clara whispered. Say it. I didn't do anything. The air grew cold. The shadows in the corners elongated. You listened. You invited. You answered. And she understood. This wasn't about Evelyn anymore. It was about anyone who heard the song. Clara fled the house that night. She stayed at an inn 2 villages away. But the humming followed. Through vents, through walls. It lived in her now. Had found space. She returned to the house one final time. This time with purpose. In the backyard stood an ancient oak, its roots tangled like grasping fingers. Her grandmother had once told her never to dig near it. Clara dug anyway. 3 feet down, her spade struck iron. Small rusted box. Inside, a lock of Evelyn's hair, a wax-sealed scroll, and a tongue dried and shriveled. Real tongue. On the scroll was a chant in an unknown language, but the melody it followed was familiar. The same 9 notes. This was the first summoning. And it hadn't been Evelyn. It had been her grandmother all along. Clara prepared a fire in the hearth. She placed the scroll, the hair, and the tongue within, and watched the flames consume the relics. The house groaned. The wind outside stopped, and the humming finally ceased. For the first time in weeks, the silence wasn't oppressive. It was calm. Whole. She placed Evelyn's remains in a small cedar box and buried them beneath the oak with her name carved into stone. And as the final spade of earth patted the grave flat, Clara spoke aloud. Rest now. Epilogue. Beneath. Weeks passed. Clara sold the house. Moved far away. The humming never returned. But some nights, in the deepest part of sleep, she dreams of floorboards swelling like lungs. Of voices harmonizing beneath her bed. And somewhere, always faint, just barely there, is the sound of something trying to remember its own name and hum it back into the world.